Hey, I'm Gary Katz from the Katz Roadshow, and this is Carpentry Magazine, and I figured it was time to finally do a full tour of my shop. This is the roll-up door we put in. It's actually a metal door. We laminated these false doors right on top of it, and you can see the cuts where the roll-up folds up. And we glued these false doors to the metal roll-up, and we screwed them from behind the roll-up door too. Let me open this up for you so you can come on in, because you won't fit through this door. This roll-up's really handy. I've backed my Sprinter in here before. We take all the large stuff in and out. I've even had my Kubota tractor inside this shop. Come on in. Well, welcome to my shop. I'm not really a good woodworker. I'm a finished carpenter, and most of the kind of work I've been doing in my shop, most of my life, is like building hollow beams for ceilings and stuff, or pre-hanging doors, or something to do with construction. And the same here. I use my shop primarily, at least I used to, for working on my home, building the trusses, the carport, and stuff like that, all the corbels and the brackets and whatever. But I really want to do fine woodworking. I'm a definite believer in Mark Spignolo and the Wood Whisperer, and I really would like to do that nice of work, so I have a passion for it. These are the two tables that I use for assembly and cutting. I drilled this one out for the Festool clamps, and this one over here I use for cutting down sheet goods. I throw a sheet of foam on top of it. All my plywood storage is in this rack over here. We'll look at that in a second. But these tables are really important. They've got wheels on them. They're exactly the same elevation, so I can wheel them together and have a really big work surface. That's how we built the trusses for my carport. And they're also at the same elevation as my table saw, so everything kind of works together. Let's take a look at the plywood storage while we're here. I use a lot of sheet goods, so I need some place to store it all, the new stuff and the scraps as well, including the foam that I use and cardboard and all kinds of sheet material. So I built a fairly good plywood storage rack, and I laid a piece of laminate and glued it down to the floor here, so it's real easy to slide the sheets in and out. It's really pretty slick, and I mean slick in both ways, and it projects out. It's proud of the rack itself, so you can drop a sheet of plywood on here on edge and it'll land right on that sheet that's sticking out of the rack, and then you can slide your sheet material right back in. And on the other side over here, this is where I store all of my clamps. So I've got all of my Bessey parallel clamps and the little Bessey quick clamps and stuff in here. So at one time I built a movable rack on wheels, and it just took up too much space and it was too heavy. So I switched that whole design to this one, and it works really well. I store all of my router bits and miscellaneous router tools right in these two sustainer cases. And on this wall, I've got my panel saw. And this is incredibly handy. Like I said, I use a lot of sheet material, and for building sets, for building crates to ship around the country for road shows and stuff. This makes it really easy for one guy to cut material very accurately without a lot of back strain. Now let's take a closer look at these assembly tables. One of these days I'm going to put doors on the faces of all these little shelf units in here, but I keep two Domino XLs in here. Routers everywhere. I've got routers plugged in that are ready to go with little edge easing bits, and I've got a router set to go with a little laminate trimmer, that kind of stuff that's really important. You don't want to waste your time. I've got a dust collector stored underneath each one of these work tables, which is really handy. And right over here is where I store my small dominoes, the small 400. Yeah, I've got 3 of them. That's because we use them with road shows too. And I took the extra ones from the road shows, since we're not doing any real soon, and brought them inside the shop so I can use them in the shop. On this side, right at the end of the work table, I store a lot of cordless drills, and you'll notice they're all labeled. Yeah, it's kind of, maybe we'll use the word fastidious instead of the A word, but I get a lot of people that come into my shop and work at different times, and it's nice to know that they're going to put my drills right back where they go, so I don't have to go hunt for them, and they're going to have the right bits in them too. I'm not sure if I should really show everybody this. It might be too hard for your heart, but remember, Festool was a Cass Roadshow sponsor for a long, long time, and that's why I have so many Festool routers. In fact, I almost have enough, not quite, to follow Jed Dixon's advice, because Jed believes that everybody should have one more router than they have router bits. So in case you buy a new router bit, you've got a router to put it in. But every single one of these routers has a bit in it, the most popular ones I use, so I rarely have to change router bits. Even with all those Festool routers, here's a couple of my favorites. This one's an old Black & Decker. I've had it since I was, I think, about 19, something like that, 20. Girlfriend bought it for me years ago, and I got that kind of sentimental value. I've had the motor rewound twice. And this one is my all-time favorite router. Bosch doesn't even make this anymore. This is their old 1613, and it has a really cool micro adjustment knob on it. So no matter where you've plunged the bit, no matter what depth you've plunged to, you have full control over the micro adjustment. And of course, I've got the 2200, I've got the 2000, which they don't even make anymore, several 1400s and several 1010s as well. So I call this one my assembly table, because I keep all of my fasteners in these drawers, at least the ones I use most frequently. And that way everything's right at hand, easy to find. And then on the other side of the table, I keep all of my fasteners. I got my little 23 gauge pins, my 21 gauge pins, and 18 gauge nails. And in here, I've got the dominoes I use most often, along with several Festool accessories that I like to have close at hand. Now I call this one my prep table. The other table is for assembly. This one's prep. I have a dust collector in here too, and all my sanders are in here. So I usually do all my wood preparation in here. I do some of the assembly in here too, because I drilled this out so I can use those Festool clamps and the hold downs and all that sort of stuff. But underneath here, I've got all different types of putty knives and tape and glue and filler and my little planer and little jigs for assembling, pre-assembling crown molding and that sort of stuff. Since we're here, let's look at the table saw. I've got a saw stop saw. No, this wasn't a sponsorship deal. I bought this one. It's at the center of my shop, and it was designed that way. I drew this building in SketchUp and drew in all the dust collection under slab before I even started construction on it. And I knew my table saw had to be dead center right off this door, so I could open up the shop door if I wanted to rip a really long board, and the board has plenty of room to get all the way to that wall over there. It's about 18 feet from the blade to the wall. I built an outfeed table for this a long time ago in Los Angeles, and I brought it up here with me, along with these drawers that are really important. They help me organize all the kinds of tools that I use frequently right in the middle of my shop. I gotta thank Mark Spagnolo again for teaching me how to make these dividers real simple. I've organized all the tape measures and different kinds of markers and squares and stuff that I use near my table saw. And I've done every one of these because there's just a lot of strange stuff I need right at my table saw. All the inserts and jigs and hold downs and stuff that I use at the saw frequently. And then in the bottom drawer here, I keep some additional jigs, my dado blade set, that sort of stuff. So I've got drawers on this side too. The drawers on this side of the outfeed table hold a lot of my old door hanging tools and parts and accessories. You can see I don't use these too often anymore, but these are the extension rods for my mortiser, my big lock mortiser, so I can hang it from the top of a door. This is all my Bosch adjustable hinge template set with extra pieces and parts for it, different cutters for my planers and stuff, and all my extra boring bits for my lock boring jig. And then in this drawer, I keep a lot of templates, lock templates, latch templates that I've made. I don't know what it is about making these templates, but once you make them, it's really tough to throw them away. So I've got templates in here that might be 15, 20, 30 years old that I haven't used in a long time. I just don't have the courage to throw them away. Here's one for a latch with a two-step design, so you can remove these screws, back the screws out, and then finish the routing for the faceplate. On the back of the outfeed table, I've got all kinds of hammers and stuff and pry bars in that drawer. This one holds some electrical power tools that I frequently use, a hot air gun, a little cordless planer. And the bottom drawer, same thing, my old sander, an iron for putting on iron-on edge banding, pliers, dikes, cutters, all my Craig clamps and stuff for assembling face frames, and a couple of jigsaws down here. And then this track is used on my outfeed table for face frames and all kinds of pocket screw joinery. And I've got drawers on this side of the outfeed table too. The top one's all drill bits. This one's all wrenches for the table saw and dust collection parts. And the bottom one's my circular saw and a screw gun and extra blades for my circular saw. So I'm definitely a power tool guy. I've got a surface planer, a nice joiner. I wish it were a wider one, but this is the space I had and the funds I had, so I limited it to an 8-inch joiner. And back here, a sentimental favorite, my old Shopsmith. This was the first floor tool I ever bought, really. And I've used it, God, I think I've had this thing for almost 40 years, and I just can't part with it. I still use it. I use the disc grinder and the little belt sander here, and occasionally I'll use it for other purposes too. And for a long time, actually, I used it as a lathe until I got serious. This whole wall is material storage, accessories and stuff. All of this in here, all these cabinets I built, there's glue and fasteners and stuff like that. This is all my sandpaper and sanding accessories. All the way down is just full of accessories. The workbench here is filled with drawers. Every drawer has a purpose, and they're all organized the same way I did with my table saw. Again, thanks to Mark Spignolo. We keep all of our drill bits here. The fast cap set that's really, really nice. Keeps it really easy to tell which bit you're getting and where to put it and exactly where to return it to. And all kinds of little fasteners and nuts and bolts and everything in hardware. This area in here is totally dedicated to sharpening for the lathe. I sharpen, my knives and my chisels and stuff right here on the Tormac. And then at the end of this bench, this is where I sharpen all of my lathe tools, the gouges and everything. So I'm really close to my lathe, and I can just bring a tool over here real quick, hit it with the ball door grinder, and go right back to work. You'll notice that all of these workbenches are elevated and suspended on the wall. There's no legs going down to the floor. I supported them all with speed braces from Paul Akers at FastCap, so I could put all of my Festool sustainers and other kind of storage underneath there. They're all on wheels, so they act almost like drawers. So there's a really good reason why I decided to do this and suspend all these workbenches and not build cabinets and storage specifically for these sustainers. I learned the hard way. I'm constantly getting new tools or changing out tools or something, so I can't dedicate storage for specific tools. It's kind of silly. So I left the whole thing open so I can switch stuff out that quick without having to worry about some kind of cabinet design. I kind of wanted to get another bandsaw so I could put a smaller blade in it for cutting radius work, but I didn't want to devote the money to it. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to make that kind of a commitment. So I bought something that was inexpensive, and now that I use this thing so frequently, I realized I'm gonna get that bandsaw. Next to it right here, I've got a little jet oscillating sander. I didn't need a big floor model. A little benchtop model is just fine for me. And then back in this corner, I've got my original lathe that I bought while I lived in LA, a little one that now my daughter uses, and she turns bowls and spindle work and stuff. And in this corner, there's my Powermatic Lathe, and this is the one that I use predominantly. I really enjoy turning bowls and doing spindle work. This is something I like to do after night, after dinner. I can come out here and I can turn something without using a lot of brain power. It's relaxing. It kind of gets me ready to go to sleep for the night. But it's so rewarding because you can start from scratch with a raw piece of, like a log, a piece of firewood. And boy, by the end of the evening, I can actually have a finished turned bowl. Even if I started with green wood, because I've got a microwave over there so I can dry the thing in 15 or 20 minutes. I really like the lathe. I bought quite a few accessories for it. And this little extension helps me get my tailstock out of the way, so when I'm turning a big bowl, I don't run into the point on the tailstock. I could spend hours here talking about the lathe, but let's keep moving. So here's what I'm talking about. Here's some walnut bowls that I'm turning for my brother. His house burned down in the Woolsey fire down in Southern California, and I thought, well, he's still rebuilding his home, and he doesn't have his lathe. He actually has exactly the same lathe, so the two of us are like this, even though we're like 1,000 miles apart. We're pretty tight when it comes to turning. So I'm turning him a bunch of walnut bowls, and I like to finish him with Odie's oil. This is something I've just discovered in the last year. It makes a really nice bowl finish, and it buffs out beautifully. So this is my big bandsaw. I use this for cutting bowl blanks and most of the kind of curved work that I do in my shop. And I leave this rip blade in here almost all the time. It's a 1-inch carbide blade. And if I'm making a bowl blank or something, I just cut the corners off until it's close to round, and then I stick it on the lathe. I use this MFT table for all of my prep work for the lathe. It's dedicated just for that. Really, seriously, I spend a lot of time in that corner over there. And here's a walnut bowl that really didn't come out too good. It warped an awful lot after I dried it and finished it. But I prep everything in here. I've got little glue sticks and little epoxy spreaders and stuff like that. My moisture meter's right in here. And over on this side, I've got all of the drill motors that I use frequently at the lathe. This is for drilling a screw chuck. This one's a Phillips driver. And this one's a square driver because I'm always running screws into my into the bowl chucks. And this is just a little pilot hole, so I never have to switch bits here. Now, all this kind of organization, especially this crazy stuff on the side with all these drills, all of this I kind of picked up after we did a tour of Fast Cap's production facility up in Seattle, Washington. And I learned from Paul Akers how important it is to cut your waste to a minimum and organize everything so you don't have to mess around changing out bits, finding a drill motor, whatever. So here's something that I think every woodworking shop should have, but be careful, because your insurance company might not be too happy about having a wood stove in your shop. I tried to get business insurance for my shop, and they wouldn't give it to me because of the wood stove, but I can't live without it. It heats my shop, I burn all my scraps in here, and maybe more importantly, I burn all the things that didn't quite come out too well, like bowls that I turned wrong or cracked or split, or ones that I turned too thin, and you can actually see right through the bottom. So it's nice to have some place to get rid of that stuff before anybody can see it. So I've got 2 portable table saws, and I bought both of them. I got this one for a pretty good deal because I do a lot of work with SawStop and I love their tools. And this is the one I use mostly when I have to do a lot of bevel stuff real quick and I don't want to fool around with my big SawStop saw. And this Bosch saw is dedicated to the dado blade. All I do on this saw is cut grooves and dados and rabbets and stuff like that. Then in the corner over here, I build a lot of cabinets for the house here, the guest house, the shop. I'm still doing cabinet doors, so both of these routers are set up and dedicated to doing a stile and rail door. I just love these things because they have all the hold downs and the feather boards and everything built in, and they're very easy to adjust. Looks like a kitchen, but it's really just the microwave that I use for my lathe. Next to it, we've got a really good construction sink, really deep one, which we use frequently. Lots of little supplies for cleaning the sprayers and paint guns and stuff like that. And a computer desk where we keep all of our paperwork. including all the storage up above. We store all of our manuals up in here, and probably the most important accessory in the shop, this is where the stereo is. So we've got good tunes in here. Right here, you'll see this little frame in here. This is the first article I ever wrote for Fine Home Building on installing locks and mortise locks. And Hart Tool Company sent me this hammer. And I framed the whole thing in this shadow box, and I've never opened it. I've never used that hammer. These are all little pieces and parts, and you'll see templates all over the shop. Right in this wall section right here is where I store all of my cordless tools and chargers, and the rest of the wall is completely devoted to my miter saw, which I probably use more frequently than any other tool. At least I have in the past. It's not really what I want to do in the future. I think I've cut enough miters in my life. I want to build furniture and do mortise and tenon stuff and things like that. But this is also my lumber storage. The lumber storage is also supported as well on speed braces from FastCap. This looks like a mess of jumbled stuff, and it gets that way frequently. About once every couple of months, either I or Devin, who's on the camera right now, I'll clean this all up, and it'll be straight and clean and sharp for about maybe a week before it ends up looking like this again. Let's go back a second, because we walked right by this. This is my old door bench, and it's tucked underneath this workbench too, which is also supported on speed braces from FastCap. And that's another reason I really like supporting and suspending all these workbenches, so I can store stuff like this. I use this door bench frequently, even though I never go out on a job site. I seem to always be having to either hang, rehang, or work on some kind of door on my own property. I've had the same bench for over 30 years. It slides right out from under the work table. And I've got all of my door tools in here, stored in here permanently. My Porta-Cable 126 planer, my Festool 1010 router with a bit in it for mortising for hinges. I've got my big Bosch drill motor in here for drilling for locks and stuff. One of these days, I'm kind of hoping that I'll know I'm done with doors, and I'll put all this stuff away someplace. I just don't know where. Speaking of old tools, this is where I store all the old ones. I store all my old tools, stuff I don't use too much anymore, on these shelves all the way up to the ceiling. You can see my lock mortiser up there. I don't use that too often anymore. Some skill saws are up there, circular saws. Porta-Cable 126 is up there too, I think an extra one. And my Festool planer's up there, an extra Festool planer on the other side. All my nail guns that I don't use, a really nice brand new router from Porta-Cable. And all my photography equipment is in here too. So I can easily access anything I need, whether I'm working in the shop or the studio, which I'll show you in just a minute. And over in the corner here is my dust collector. I designed the shop just for the dust collector so that all the dust collection pipes go underneath the slab, like I said before, except for the dust collection that goes to the lathe. I wasn't certain how I was going to accomplish the lathe dust collections, so I put it in afterwards and had to build this little diverter box. It handles it perfectly. You'll also notice that there's no bag filter in here. I blow all the really fine stuff right outside. I do that because I don't want the fine stuff inside my shop. I have plenty of room outside to blow that stuff right outside without causing any damage, and it makes the dust collector a lot more powerful. It draws a lot more dust through the system. Now, since we're standing here, you're going to see there's photography equipment all over the place. This is all the lights and stuff, and everything's on wheels, so I can slide it around. So I love having these scrims in here too. I use them for flags and for little diverters or diffusion panels. It's really nice being able to pull one out really quickly if you're getting a reflection or too much light on some object while you're photographing. Now, check out the bathroom. It's even got a shower. So this is a full bathroom. I actually designed it like this on purpose because I wasn't certain, like down the road, somebody may want to use the whole studio section of the shop as a guest room or something. So there's a sink right here and a toilet, and back in this corner over here, there's a shower too. Now you can't use the shower because I didn't think about the paint and the stain. I had no idea how many gallons of paint and stain I was going to end up having to store. So this is where I store it all. Here we are back in the studio, and this is where we shoot all the video. This is where I set up for rehearsing presentations and things like that. I use this room for all sorts of stuff, and I intentionally keep it empty. I don't store any tools in here permanently at all. I don't usually store all this roadshow gear in my studio here, but when we got back from the last road shows in Northern California, I left everything out. Some of the fellows at that show were really curious. They wanted to learn more about how to lay out stair stringers, so I promised them that I'd shoot a video of that presentation. And that's why we left this whole set out in the studio. We're going to be shooting a video of this just as soon as I can, and just immediately after it's finished, I'll post this up on YouTube, because a promise is a promise. I'm a firm believer in that whole lean philosophy that Paul Akers has been talking about. That's why we built this cabinet, just for shooting video with a little widescreen monitor on here. That way I can see what the shot is. We can correct some kind of framing or something without me having to get up. A lot of times I might be on the ground. So we built the top of this on a hinge so I can point the monitor down toward the floor if I'm down on my knees. And that way, it's real easy to check the lighting, to check for a close-up, to check for a wide shot or a medium shot, and make sure that the format is just perfect for what we want to achieve. So we designed this so it can hold everything we need. There's Kaizen foam in every single one of these drawers. I keep an iPad out here for a teleprompter in case we're using a script. And there's a charger inside of here so the thing's plugged in all the time. All of our little diffusion panels and stuff are in here. And all the microphone and the audio gear is in this drawer, all set into Kaizen foam. And the cabinet underneath is where we store our extra stands and little lights, little smaller lights for illuminating maybe a close-up or something like that. It's a super handy tool chest when it comes to shooting video. Now let's check out the outside here, because this is where I store all of my logs for the lathe. Hey, come on. Good girl. Hey, these are those walnut logs I was talking about that I've been turning bowls from. I got these from Willie Ging, the tree cutter that's become a really close friend of mine. Both of these walnut logs I got from him, and I got this black locust back in here. This is some black oak that came from a tree that fell down right over here. I've turned stuff from all of this. And this is a nice piece that Willie also gave me. It's pure redwood, all heart. The amount of sapwood in here is so minimal on the edge, and it's all just a gorgeous chunk. It's half the bottom of the tree. You can really tell it's redwood just in the bark. But this here is some of that black oak, and we had a portable mill come out here and slab all of these for us, and they're drying out right now. I think they're about 26% moisture content, so they'll be pretty soon they'll be dry enough to work with. Let me show you some of these pieces I've got ready for bowls too. These are a bunch of small logs I've been saving. Here's a little slab of American elm, and there's some more elm in here, and some madrone. I love turning madrone bowls. Another piece of elm and some of that black locust. Here's some big pieces of Doug fir that have dried out. And back in here I've got some box elder that I saved from a tree that fell down at a neighbor's house. Boy, I really like that box elder, man. When you open up those logs, you find out they're spalted too, so the color and the grain's just crazy beautiful. And speaking of wood, a lot of people ask me about the wood on my shop. It's not real barn wood. It's made to look like it. I got it from a mill in Wyoming, and they comb it and they stain it in 3 colors. So when you install it, you mix those colors up, and it ends up looking just like barn wood. I've used this same material on my house too.